Welcome to DasGeek. I owe all of you an apology. I just did a video on openSUSE Tumbleweed talking about my love for it, and all of a sudden I was reading through the comments, really nice comments, great people, giving me tips and tricks and other things. I love this community. And I read one that says, hey, how is the gaming? And it struck me. I didn't do any gaming in that video, and I always end my distro reviews with gaming. So I am so sorry, but this is going to be a whole video of gaming and benchmarks just for you. John, thank you so much for pointing that out. It was one of those moments where I smacked myself in the head. So real quick, I don't put a whole lot into benchmarks, and the reason is a lot of times these benchmarks are based on the idea that everything is programmed perfectly in the game that you're playing, and it's all optimized, and therefore you're going to have that same experience of the benchmarks and the tools and games and things that you utilize. But I would show these here because I think it's an interesting result. Here you can see some of the tests that get run. This is Geekbench. It runs a single core test with all of these various items that it looks through: ray tracing, rigid body physics, Gaussian blurs, memory, copying, all of these things. And then it does the same thing for multi-core, and then you can go look at the results. So I've run several of these tests throughout the three distros here. Right here is openSUSE Tumbleweed that we're on now, and you could see the latest results, the multi-core score and the single core score. And you can also see the operating system kernel that we're on here. With Arch, you can see I also got some amazing scores here. And it seems like there's a little bit of, while most of the scores fall into the same range, the more that you run them, the scores would change depending on whatever factors were going on. In all of the cases, I would, turn off all the services in the background and try to run them. So they would shift anywhere between 40 to 100 in the scores one way or the other. So really, at the end of the day, this is Fedora's here. I think that, this score here was the only one that I couldn't get lifted in the multi-core support for Fedora, but it's still so close to the other scores here between Arch and openSUSE. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that, in Arch and openSUSE, you're on the latest and greatest kernel. You're going to have all of the latest support in there for the hardware if it's baked into the kernel, like most of my system, which is all AMD based. And in Fedora, they just released Fedora 30. Now, if we do this test 4 months from now or more in between releases, I think the variance between Arch and openSUSE and Fedora is probably going to be even higher. So just some interesting numbers there to look at, but nothing to really make you base your decision on. But obviously, openSUSE is doing a lot of things right in their optimization. They've done a great job here and came very close to the speed of Arch, which most distros do not come close at all until, like I said, they have a brand new release, because there's so much time in between the releases and when in a rolling distro and all of the kernel updates that happen. Now let's get into some gaming. I'm going to show you a whole bunch of different games, and footage and frames per second will be up in the left-hand corner to make up for my miss. I hope you enjoy it. You've got Steamplay games in here, you have native Linux games in here, and you have Feral Port games that we'll take a look at. So let's go check that out right now. All right, so the first game that we have here is Tomb Raider. So if you want to look back at some of my other videos, you can see me doing benchmark tests utilizing the benchmark tool within Tomb Raider. Now, Tomb Raider is an interesting one because it's technically optimized for Linux because it was a Feral Interactive port. Now, Feral is the one who did the porting here, and obviously if the game makers themselves are the ones doing the port and it would be native to Linux, you can expect even better results. But what you're going to see here with openSUSE is just a fantastic result. I have to go back into my archives to see other scores, but it's certainly as high as any other distro that we've run through this benchmark test here. I was absolutely blown away. After we do this test, we're going to check out Ballistic Overkill next, and then we have even more games up there as a treat for you. So this is one of my favorite benchmarks to run to see how a system does. And to me, it really ends up translating into the overall optimization. So what you can see is minimum frames per second, 97.4, max at 226, and an average frames per second of 170.6. How does that feel, console gamers? Oh my gosh. All right, so now we've got some Ballistic Overkill. This is another native Linux game. You'll find that Michael and me and many people from the community for Destination Linux, or even this channel, will end up playing this game when we have some downtime. It's just a really fun game to play. You can see the frames per second up there. They definitely range in the high hundreds, mid to high hundreds, depending on where you're at. In this particular case, I am running this game not on a server connected with other people. There will be a game that I play next where we'll do the server. The reason is when you're on a server and you have different ping times and loading and basically being held back by other players, limited system, it can affect your frames per second when you're doing a test like this. So I like a more pure to start out. And this is TF2, so now I'm on a server with a bunch of people playing Team Fortress 2, and I would say the graphics are probably around the same level as Ballistic Overkill. Now, I actually won this game, which is shocking. I can't believe it, and I feel like I actually did a lot to get that cart moved across the other team's territory. So this was a big win, and I wanted to show all the footage so you could see that I actually won something once, but there's just not enough time for it. In any case, this is just one of the games that we played recently with a lot of folks from the community and had an absolute blast. Chris Ware was there, Alan Pope, just a bunch of people from the Linux community on there, and we had a great time, and you could see just fantastic frame rate results there. This is Everspace, which is native Linux game here. Now, Everspace isn't the most perfect port of or native Linux game, meaning there's just a lot of optimization opportunities, I feel like, for this game, but it's really good at testing your hardware, and you'll see just a lot of jumps up and down with the frames here in this particular game, which to me is really an optimization issue, because in certain points there's really nothing more going on than others. It's just the frames rates seem pretty sporadic, but very much what I expect to see in the frame rates that you're seeing in the left-hand corner, ranging in this case between probably averaging around 90 to 100, is very much what I expect to see while I'm in Arch. Now, this is a Steamplay game, so this is not native at all. It shouldn't run on Linux. It wasn't made to run on Linux. The developers didn't do anything to make it run on Linux. This is just pure awesome Valve Steam who love Linux and have supported it and improved gaming on it tremendously. There's now 5,000 of these games out there that weren't made to run on Linux but work perfectly with it, and this is one of those called Remember Me. So in this case, I'm not looking for the highest frames per second, although some of the games that run Vulkan and things like that can get incredible results, even though they weren't made to run on Linux, utilizing Steamplay. This game, I'm just expecting to at least get the base standard of 60 frames per second. And what you can see is that that's pretty much achieved here. For most part, I'm getting well over 60 frames per second. In some cases, it's dipping and dropping. In some places it's going higher, and that's all a result of the fact that this game was never meant to run on Linux. Thanks to Steamplay, we can run games like this on Linux. By the way, Remember Me looks like an absolute amazing game. This was gifted to me by Dark One, and I cannot wait to get in there and play this some more. It just absolutely looks like a ton of fun, and it's right up my alley because it has an easy mode. And you know how much I love to have like an easy mode in there so that I'm not dying all the time. So this is the results of gaming in openSUSE. My honest feedback on this is it feels very much like gaming in any other distro. There's not a whole lot of differences between, gaming in Arch and gaming in openSUSE that I can tell. There are some differences at times depending on your hardware and the drivers that you have installed. If you're running something like an Ubuntu and you're in between releases, meaning they haven't had a release recently, and maybe you have some latest hardware, you start to see big differences there because, let's say, AMD has put additional patches and things in place inside the kernel, and those won't be rolled immediately into the Ubuntu's until a hardware enablement stack or a newer version comes out. Same for Fedora. But obviously on a rolling release, you're expecting to always have that latest and greatest, which is why I think rolling releases are the future. So openSUSE, how does it game? To answer John's question, incredible. Absolutely beautiful to game on. Everything that I expect it to perform on, it does wonderfully. This is an amazing distro. I love it more and more each day. I'm just really anxious to get in there and learn more. Until next time, get out there and fill your brains.
Subscribe. Don't watch the video.